Greetings gamers, welcome to part number 55 of my Let's Play Fire Emblem 9, Path of Radiance. Today I have a little bit more to talk about concerning certain units. First and foremost, Nazir. I didn't really go over his growth rates last time, and that is because I was mostly busy talking about other things. I decided to leave his growth rates on hold, along with Ina's. So, depending on what you do, if you escape or do not defeat the Black Knight within the 6-turn limit, you are given Ina. Ina has a growth rate set of 145% HP, 35% strength, 5% magic, 50% skill, 60% speed, 40% luck, 40% defense, and 30% resistance, with 10 levels to gain. Whereas Nazir has much better bases by and large, and also better transformation bonuses, alongside better growth rates, but only 2 levels to gain. So 150% HP, marginally better. 50% strength is actually significantly better, but the problem is with only 2 levels to grow, it's not all that important. With 10% magic, as well as 55% skill, and 45% speed. The only growth rate that's really much lower than Ina's. He has a 35% in luck, a 60% in defense, and a 25% in resistance. So I like to think that Nazir is the better unit overall. Now you can train Ina, and if you force stats on her like I did with Alencia and a couple other units, you can make Ina better, but it's going to be marginal. What makes these two units great is that you can give them resolve and other things of that nature, which I highly recommend. If you're going to use these units, I highly recommend giving resolve, because they are some of the only units that are effective against the final boss of this game. And at base, you're not hardly doing anything with Nazir, especially if you're going to use the Demiband. Especially. And I mean especially. Now, the Bjork Guard is cute, but it doesn't really work like you would hope it to do. It only reduces the effectiveness of weaponry that is effective against Legus, and makes it so that there is no effectiveness. So his breath, as well as Ina's breath, is very unfortunate. It is a weapon that is marginal at best compared to its incarnation in Radiant Dawn. I sort of wish and hope that if they do make remakes of these games, that this is something that the intelligent system changes. The might is just not enough on any of the Legus weapons in this game. It's just not. It seems like the Legus are so powerful at first, when you first get Leave and she's able to two-shot everything, but even if she grows alongside your party, there's going to come a point where she's not going to be effective compared to the rest of your units, especially because she only has one range. And the dragons only having one range on their breath in this game is very weird. I am bringing him just for the use of him in this particular chapter, but not for really anything other. Ina has Renewal as well as Miracle and Boon, whereas Nazir has Nihil and Boon. Nihil is almost pointless on this unit. Very strange that he has it, but you know, what can you do? There are some interesting units in this chapter, including a Meteor Bolganone user that you can't really reach unless you go out of your way. There's also a Sleep user here and a Silence here. I think, yeah, that's all of the ridiculous stabs I have to deal with. I'm going to try my hardest to deal with them as soon as possible and make sure that they're out of the way. And then, I've got Hedwyn here, the boss. He is a Thunder Sage of sorts, as he has an S rank in Thunder, which is incredible. He comes with Bolting, which is a very powerful tome, 21 magic, you know, he's going to do something with that, but he also comes with the highest level of lightning magic. Mastery is quite difficult, but it is devastatingly powerful. 15 might, 75 hit, 10 crit, 14 weight. This is what I've been waiting for Tormod. The problem is he actually doesn't have nowhere near enough strength to reduce the weight entirely of that, but because he has almost cap speed, it's not going to matter all that much. And, you know, I'm excited about using it because I think it's a very, very cool looking tome. He has no skills to speak of. This is one of those issues where characters who have Nihil in this game, it is almost a useless skill. Now, this is kind of true in most of the Fire Emblem franchise. Even in Thracia, Nihil is almost useless. There's only a handful of fights that you can fight in that game. Now, granted, there's more in that game than there is in this, but it's still almost useless. I never really go out of my way to get the Nihil skill in that game, and when I do, it's just for the sake of it. Ike is turning out to be much better than I had hoped. He was looking to be very poor in his offense and whatnot earlier, but I gave him a few bonus experience points levels as well as the rest of my units, and I think I'm pretty well good to go. So, Ike, time to move. Alright, so this chapter is fun because it's all really strong Legus. It's great for experience points gaining. It's not what I would call that difficult of a chapter. Usually, I will have Tibarn over here halted, so he doesn't do anything in this chapter. I'm not going to be doing that because most of my units are either at or near max level, and it's not like I'm doing transfers, so that matters pretty well zero. Alright, so I'm going to use a Legus stone here. I'm also going to chant. Ike is most definitely going to get his last level, either within this chapter or within the next. There's going to be enough experience points going around, kind of thing. So it's not the biggest of deals if I go ahead and take Nazir here and have him move. So I have decided that the animations are going to stay on for the rest of this playthrough. It is going to mean that there's probably going to be an episode or two more than I'd probably necessarily need or want, but that's okay, because I'm pretty darn close to the finish of this game. And what's so great about that is that it is actually a little bit quicker than I had originally anticipated. Very unfortunately, I have to be careful with this Ashura staff. In fact, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to trade over the Ashura staff so I don't accidentally use it this chapter. I'm going to be definitely using it next, probably multiple times, and I do intend on Himmerning it as well. I think it's okay to keep this physic on for the time being. I could use Sleep here. Alright, cool. Fantastic. Coming off of games like Thracia, having the staves miss in such an inordinate amount of times they can miss. I mean, she only had a 62 hit, which, you know, in false hit, that's like a 70. But still, it's not all that great. And that's a crit. Good job, Tironio. One of my favorite units in the franchise. I love generals, but the problem is that most times generals are not handled correctly. So it is pretty obvious that not only is Tironio one of my favorites in the franchise, so is Xavier. And there's a lot of people who would probably think that I'm a little bit crazy for that because, you know, neither unit are competitive or whatever you would call it. But I don't particularly care about that. I just love having and using strong, sturdy units. Now, granted, I will say that Tironio is definitely not like top 5 material in the franchise. He's maybe top 10, maybe, if I'm being generous. I think Xavier is a better unit. Though, Tironio has better resistance and better speed for his respective game than necessarily that Xavier does in his game. Xavier is just a cooler recruit, as well as the fact that generals in Thracia have access to swords, axes, lances, and bows, and he has an A rank in bows and axes and a C rank in swords. That's like all the benchmarks you would possibly need in that game, and he comes with it off the bat. Alongside Pavis, Wrath, and Accost, he is an incredible unit. And witnessing the very first crit that Nazir applies, I pretty well love gushing about that game. I mean, there's a lot of things about Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn, the Tellius entries, that I find to be incredibly good. So a lot of folks will look at me and say, well, you know, Gamer Man, you do a lot of complaining about these games. What's funny about that is most of the folks I know who enjoy... I'm not going to do that. Most of the folks I know who enjoy games like Fire Emblem 7 will say that that game has a terrible story, which I don't necessarily agree with. It's not as egregious as the story in Radiant Dawn, for instance. But will say it has a terrible story, right? And yet will throw nothing but compliments about the gameplay and the guidance and other things like that. I kind of feel the same way about Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn. They have very incredible gameplay, and yes, though the animations are very slow and not all that great, I turn off the animations 90% of the time. Like my last Fire Emblem Path of Radiance playthrough, I played with animations, I think, the entire time. And upon further understanding, I have since pretty well declared that I'm not going to do that in any further Fire Emblem entries. There's some folks who would probably like it if I was to have the animations on more often than not. But, well, it's just too slow. It's just too slow. It's one of those things that you wish was changed if a remake came out for the Tellius entries. The only problem is that folks like me are very afraid, and I mean very afraid, of what's going to happen to Fire Emblem as a whole in the future, especially remakes being bastardized. You do not want that. I do not want that. I don't know anybody who looks at that and says, you know, I would be so happy if they changed these games in such a way that destroyed them. Destroyed what they represented or stood for, or became politically minded. Very nice. Her first attack under animations on is a crit. I appreciate that. Tomahawk. This thing is a beautiful axe. But going back on to my discussion of the generals, most people, and you'll see this on a lot of people who play Fire Emblem more competitively, like low turn count or speed runs or high efficiency playthroughs, will just flat out tell you that folks like generals and armor knights and whatnot are pretty well the biggest waste of time. But it makes a lot of sense for them to say that for them. The problem is that Fire Emblem is not a two-player game. The competitive nature of Fire Emblem is almost entirely pointless, whether there is competition or not, or whether people are low turn counting or speed running or this, that, or the other. That's exterior. That has nothing to do with the actual games. So when folks will say, okay, neither of you actually need to be healed, especially Tyronia. When folks will say things like that, I'm just kind of like, well, you do realize that Fire Emblem is not the type of game you're thinking of? And it really isn't? Nice. What is up with all of my units critting? So sometimes you just like to have fun. And I have my limits to that too. There are instances where, you know, for instance, in Fire Emblem 7, Nino, most folks who like the 0 to hero units love Nino. I don't really care for 0 to hero units. I really don't. I play usually with pre-promotes. There was a time where I cared for them, but even when I did, Nino was like one of the last units I ever used in a Fire Emblem 7 run. And the only reason why I used her was specifically so that I could see what she really had to offer, what was her benefit. And it wasn't much. Honestly, it wasn't much. Pent is just so good in that game, and you get him so much earlier, you don't have to use a guiding ring on him. He's already promoted. He already has A in staves and A in anima. You really have to be grasping at straws to try to find a reason why a character like Nino is good. She's just not. She might be fun to use. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind. There's a lot of people who think she's a fun unit to use. But there is no debating on whether or not she's a good unit. She's not a good unit. It's like Cain, Alba, and Robert in Thracia. They're not good units. And in this game particularly, Alencia is only a good unit if you consider her staff utility or if you bust her wide open with some bonus experience points. Otherwise, she's not really a good unit, but this game offers bonus experience points as a way to patch up bad units. Tormod, joining as late as he does, he's not a good mage. It's the reason why I picked him for this, so that I would basically be gimping myself for a while. Whew! I thought as much when I first snuck in here, but this really is an unbelievable place. What in Ashira's name is going on? Why are all these crazed legoos creeping about? Oh, you don't like this, eh? Neither do I. This helmet and armor are horribly restrictive, you know. How's that, Leanne? It's been 20 years, but I'm still quite an eyeful, don't you agree? Yeah, I haven't changed much, eh? And you knew it was me back there right away, didn't you? I'm glad you survived. It's very good to see you again. Now, on to the problem at hand. We went to the trouble of escaping that tower, so I'd hate to end up a meal for one of our insane cousins. Our objective is to rendezvous with Nalucci. Here we go, Leanne. Hold on tight. Leanne's wonderful gibberish. Even good old Ike is doing next to nothing to this dragon. Now, ooh. Did he just miss a 90+ hit? That's kind of exceptionally interesting. So, I almost want to say, yeah, I did not bring any Legoo slaying weapons, which is not great, to say the absolute least, because the dragons are such a terror when it comes to defense. You're kind of at a loss if you're fighting them with inadequate weapons. Alright, so, like for instance, this guy has 35 strength, 30 defense, 25 resistance. He's far and away better than good old Nazir here. Okay. He is KOing him, so I'm going to take this cat out. Good job, Nazir. That will be a great help. So, Nazir without the Demi-Band is quite a formidable unit. I'm not going to use the second Legoo stone this chapter. It's going to be, well, second use of that stone, unless I do have more. I might. That's something I probably should have checked before all this. Okay, so it doesn't really matter. I doubt I'm going to need a second. The speed at which Astra activates and the attacks happen in this game is really cool. Unfortunately, it's not kept that way in a later entry. So, my best recourse for dragons is Tormod, and he's not a good one, because most of them have good resistance. Now, granted, he is going to actually KO this dragon here if he hits all 3 hits. I did not actually check to see if he had less than 100 hit. This is the kind of stuff that makes you wish that triple effectiveness was in this game. And I'm not going to lie, I would be half-minded to change that about this game myself, like patch it myself, just because I think it's egregious that it's not a thing in the game. Alright. Killing Edge. I'm going to use the Fulfilled. A beautiful blue lance. And that kitty cat is struck down for good. Gonzo. Yeah, the sleep, he's going to most likely try to put one of my units to sleep. It's one of the good reasons why I have all of my units surrounding Nazir here. That is particularly due to the fact that Nazir cures status with his boon skill. 15 times 2. That's perfectly fine. Brave Axe is going to be going bye-bye pretty soon. And I'm going to set you up right next to Nazir. Physic. Har needs it the most. Do have to be very careful about enemies. I wish you could check global ranges in this game, but you cannot. And then the dragon. Now she does have a 41 attack magically. She would do a pretty significant amount of damage to him. Actually, 17 damage a hit. I don't think that's all that bad of a use of the good old... What I could do... I could actually try to put... Yeah, only a 36 hit. I'm going to try it, but... Yeah, I did not... I was not under any impression that that would actually work. Unfortunately, that's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes. I don't really understand why Tibarn is taking his sweet old time moving around this map, not really doing anything, not attacking anyone. You almost think he would go for the sleeping meteor user. Yeah, that's a good chunk of damage. Nice, Tyronio. Perfect. What's going on? They're all looking the same direction. Tibarn and friends, eh? Oh, very good. This will work out nicely. Nestling, we found you at last. Nalucci, you're here sooner than expected. You pushed your old wings to the limit, didn't you? I couldn't be late to the rescue of my dear Lady Leanne, now could I? Oh, what a glorious sight. You look so much like your dear departed mother. Hey, save your tears for later, while Tibarn and the others take care of the enemy. We must escape. Yes, of course, this way. Interesting little story bit, not really much of anything else. Uh-huh. Not doubling. I think Fulfilled is the best choice here. Would be nice if he crit, but I don't see that happening. This is okay, though, and I'm actually hoping he hits Tyronio. Oh. Of course he didn't. But the reason why I was hoping for that is, well, simply due to the fact that I would have enjoyed Tyronio being put into resolve. That would help him out a lot concerning the defeat of the rest of this chapter. Because this chapter is not that difficult at all if you have good position units and you know what you're doing, so on and so forth. I cannot believe that Devdan is doing just enough damage. Good shot. Yeah, the dragons are mighty. And there's not really any good, effective way to deal with them because they have so much darn defense and resistance. Okay, perfect. Silver bow. Of course, you do have to be very careful of Headwind and his gang, as well as the Sleep and Silence users. The Silence is not of any kind of effect to me, though, because, you know, there's nobody going to have the ability to silence somebody who has 26 magic. It's just not happening. Okay. Yeah, I'm not doing that. But what I will do... Well, she missed. Kind of to be expected because, I mean, she only had, what was that, a 59 hit? Not all that great. Now, Thunder should be perfectly fine for this situation, especially because it has it has more crit than Thoron. I find that to be very strange. It's almost like they were so afraid of Thoron being as powerful as it should be. Thunder magic has always been known for having high crit, always, in Fire Emblem. There's hardly an instance where Thunder magic didn't have some sort of crit added to it. This is even the case for something as simple as, like, regular old Thunder. I could try again. I'm not going to need this staff in the next map, so it's okay that I use it up there. Alright, Tyronia. Because I don't need you to be next to the Healer of Sleep, I'm going to move you up and ready to deal with the rest of these units. So this is nice, because it's going to be very likely that Tyronia is going to take enough damage here to be put into resolve this coming enemy phase. And after he is going to be a force to be reckoned with. Very interesting. I can see why they wouldn't necessarily want to attack Tyronia. I'm pretty sure these guys are probably doing next to no damage to him at all. Which is okay. Though he has Provoke, so it's, well, just very interesting. I'll just put it that way. I still have 3 more dragons to deal with, as well as the boss and all of these enemies. So, hopefully, everything goes as planned. Yeah, it would be very nice if he had gotten hit by that dragon already, because had he gotten hit, he would already be two-shotting all of these units. Attacking back, throwing caution to the wind. This guy has a rune sword, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. Nice dodge. Alright, 1 dragon. Depending on how much damage he does, this could be kind of a bit scary. Yeah, I was thinking. Yeah, if he gets hit by the other dragon, this could be a reset, which would be very much a shame. Very much. I'm really hoping he dodges. This is one of those things where he took too much scrap damage here and there. Come on. Yeah. It is a reset, of course. Goodbye, Tyronia. You have perished yet again. Well, I think this is the first time he's ever perished in one of my playthroughs. Alright, gamers, I am back after a little bit of issue, but issue is gone and over with, so I'm okay. Everything is fine and glorious. Yeah, I guess it's okay that a dragon attacks Nazir. What's very unfortunate is that none of my sleep staves hit either the meteor user or the sleep wielder. He missed his only sleep against Titania, which is kind of to be expected, but still a shame nonetheless. Hilariously, this guy just crit Titania last turn. Did 27 damage too, which was not insignificant. Ooh. You know, I just realized that that guy was doing more than enough damage to one-shot with a crit against Stefan. That would have not have been all that good. Let's just be honest for a moment. So I'm probably going to need to use a couple of units. I'm probably going to need to use both Mist and Tormod for healing this turn, which is fine. It is why I have them, after all. Now the boss does not move because this is a Siege chapter, unfortunately for him. So his range is much less than this. It's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So his range is to here. And though he has a lot of might and potential damage, it's not all that big of a worry in my humble opinion. Just due to the fact that by the time you are relatively within his range, you're going to be able to get to him quickly and then KO him quickly. Yeah, he is doing 43 damage, so he's doing 18 to good old Tyronio. I think it's just for the best I keep him out of the way. However, I am going to go ahead and use a Pure Water on him for multiple reasons that will show themselves very shortly here. Luckily for me, Rayson did just transform, so that's fantastic. And alright, I'm actually going to use him to chant for all 4 of these units. And I do have to be careful. He'd heal 22 to Tyronio, which is great for his, you know, survivability, not so great for the fact that I want him to be at low health. Alright, Brave Bow doing exactly what it needs to. I would go attack him, but just not a great idea. I don't think I have any restores on any of my characters, unfortunately, so Nazir is my only means of actually restoring someone. The problem with Nazir is that he is going to run out of his gauge in a moment. Not great. There shouldn't be all that many units that reach him, but still not great. That is the end of my turn. And yes, the bishop with the sleep has been destroyed by Tibarn. Good job, Tibarn. You've done relatively nothing this chapter, but you are finally proving to be somewhat useful now. Thank you. What I just realized is that, oh man. Yeah, I put Devdan in his range. Wow. Quite the insane amount of damage. Tibarn just procced his class skill, which is basically this game's version of Pavis. It is called Cancel. Tibarn is a very good unit, in my humble opinion. but unfortunately you can't really use him other than directing him in this chapter. It's not that big a deal, though, because he's still very useful, especially against dragons. He does quite a significant amount of damage. That crit was not necessarily likely, but it doesn't matter, because the fact of the matter is that he would have still done 30 damage to that dragon. And this turn is over. With that, however, it is time for me to end off this episode. So yes, even though I have quite a bit left to deal with, including the hardest dragon in this chapter, potentially the biggest boss of the chapter himself, this dragon here, I have to end off this episode. I want to thank you for joining me. If you like my content, please upvote and follow, or like and subscribe, depending on your platform. And while you're at it, have a great and glorious day gaming.